Marcus Chin never imagined that losing his voice would save his empire. The tech billionaire who commanded boardrooms across 3 continents was about to discover that sometimes the most important conversations happen in silence, and the people we overlook might be the ones holding our futures in their hands. When his trusted Korean interpreter vanished without a trace on the morning of the biggest deal of his career, Marcus thought his world was crumbling. Little did he know that a quiet housemaid named Elena, who had been invisible in his mansion for 2 years, was about to become the most valuable person in his life. This is the true story of how desperation, cultural barriers, and unexpected kindness transformed not just a business deal, but the very soul of a man who thought money could solve everything. Sometimes the universe has a way of teaching us that our greatest strengths come from the most unexpected places, and that being truly wealthy has nothing to do with bank accounts. Marcus Chin's eyes snapped open at exactly 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before his alarm. His internal clock had been programmed by decades of high-stakes business deals, and today was no exception. In fact, today was the exception that would either crown his career or destroy everything he had built over the past 15 years. The Korean conglomerate Hansung Industries was coming to his Beverly Hills mansion at 2 p.m. to finalize a merger that would value his tech company at $12 billion. $12 billion. The number still made his heart race, even though he had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times. Marcus swung his legs out of his custom Italian leather bed and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Los Angeles stretched before him like a circuit board, lights flickering in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere in that sprawling metropolis, his Korean interpreter David Kim was probably having his morning coffee, preparing for what Marcus had called the most important 6 hours of their professional relationship. David had been with Marcus for 3 years. Fluent in both Korean and the subtle language of international business, David was more than an interpreter. He was Marcus's cultural bridge, his secret weapon in navigating the complex world of Asian corporate relationships. Without David, Marcus might as well be trying to perform brain surgery with a butter knife. Marcus's phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text message from his assistant Sarah. All systems go for today. Conference room ready, documents prepared, catering confirmed for 1 p.m. David's flight landed on time last night. Perfect. Marcus had flown David to Seoul 2 weeks ago to handle preliminary negotiations. The man had worked miracles, smoothing over cultural misunderstandings that could have tanked the deal before it even began. Marcus smiled, remembering David's report about how he had spent 3 hours in a Korean barbecue restaurant with Hansung's executives, not talking business, but sharing stories about their families. That was David's gift. He understood that in Korean business culture, trust was built over shared meals and personal connections, not PowerPoint presentations. The morning routine began like clockwork. Marcus's personal trainer arrived at 6:15 for their 45-minute session in the home gym. His chef prepared the usual breakfast: egg whites, steel-cut oats, and fresh fruit. His driver polished the Bentley while his security team conducted their daily perimeter check. Every detail was orchestrated with military precision because Marcus believed that success was built on the foundation of flawless execution. At 9:30 a.m., Marcus was in his home office reviewing the merger documents one final time when his phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "David's here early," Marcus said, answering without looking up from the papers. "Good. Tell him to review the technical specifications section one more time. I want to make sure our translation of the AI development timeline is perfect." There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. "Marcus, David isn't here." Marcus's pen stopped moving across the page. "What do you mean he isn't here? It's 9:30. He's supposed to be here by 9:15 for our final prep session. I've been calling his phone for the past hour. It goes straight to voicemail. I called the hotel where he was staying last night. They said he never checked in." The merger documents suddenly felt heavy in Marcus's hands. "That's impossible. You confirmed his flight landed." "It did land. I checked with the airline. David Kim was on passenger manifest, and he picked up his luggage. But that's the last trace of him." Marcus stood up so quickly that his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "Sarah, this isn't funny. David doesn't just disappear. The man sends me hourly updates when he goes to the grocery store." "I know, Marcus. I'm as confused as you are." I've already called the police to file a missing person report, but they say we need to wait 24 hours unless there's evidence of foul play. 24 hours. Marcus looked at his watch. The Korean executives would be walking through his front door in 4.5 hours, expecting to finalize a deal that required precise communication about technical specifications, legal frameworks, and financial structures. All in Korean, a language that Marcus spoke about as well as he could perform opera. "Get me a replacement interpreter," Marcus said, already walking toward his computer. "Call the agency David works for. Call 3 agencies. Call 10 agencies. I don't care what it costs." "I already tried that," Sarah said, and her voice carried the weight of bad news. The agency sent their 2 best backup interpreters to a Samsung conference in San Francisco. Their 3rd choice is sick with food poisoning. I've called 7 other agencies in Los Angeles. The qualified Korean business interpreters are either booked or unavailable on such short notice. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine panic. Not the adrenaline rush of a challenging negotiation or the calculated stress of a high-stakes presentation. This was pure, undiluted panic. The feeling of watching a 15-year dream slip through his fingers because of something completely outside his control. "What about flying someone in from another city?" Marcus asked, grasping for solutions like a drowning man reaching for driftwood. "I checked. The earliest anyone could arrive is 8 p.m., and that's only if the weather cooperates. There's a storm system moving through the Midwest that's already delayed 4 flights." Marcus stared at the merger documents spread across his desk. Each page represented months of careful planning, relationship building, and strategic maneuvering. The Hansung deal wasn't just about money. It was about legitimacy in the global market, about proving that his company belonged at the table with the world's tech giants. More than that, it was personal. Marcus's parents had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but determination and a belief that their son could achieve anything in America. His father had worked double shifts in a restaurant kitchen to pay for Marcus's computer programming classes. His mother had cleaned office buildings at night while studying English during the day. This deal was their vindication, proof that their sacrifices had meaning. "There has to be something," Marcus said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew Sarah had already exhausted every possibility. She was the most efficient, thorough assistant he had ever worked with. If she couldn't find a solution, there probably wasn't one. "Marcus, maybe we should consider postponing the meeting," Sarah suggested gently. "Absolutely not." The words came out sharper than Marcus intended. "Do you know how hard it was to get Chairman Park and his team to come here? They're flying back to Seoul tomorrow morning for another deal. If we postpone, we lose our window. And if we lose our window, Hansung will sign with Technova instead." Technova, Marcus's biggest competitor, run by his former business partner Jason Wright. The man who had stolen Marcus's first major client, poached his best engineers, and spent the past 5 years trying to prove that he was the superior entrepreneur. The thought of Jason closing the deal that Marcus had spent 2 years developing was worse than financial ruin. It would be complete professional humiliation. Marcus walked to his window and looked down at the courtyard where his staff was preparing for the Korean delegation's arrival. His head gardener was adjusting the placement of white orchids. David had mentioned that white flowers symbolized respect in Korean culture. His chef was preparing a traditional Korean tea service. Every detail had been planned to honor his guests and demonstrate cultural awareness, except for the one detail that mattered most: being able to actually communicate with them. That's when Marcus noticed Elena. Elena Vasquez had been part of his household staff for almost 2 years, but Marcus realized with sudden shame that he knew almost nothing about her. She was quiet, efficient, and practically invisible, exactly what Marcus thought he wanted in domestic help. She arrived every Tuesday and Friday to clean the house, and she did her job so well that Marcus rarely even saw her. But there she was, arranging fresh flowers in the conference room, moving with careful precision as she positioned each white orchid to create perfect symmetry. Something about her deliberate, respectful movements reminded Marcus of the way David had described Korean attention to detail and reverence for ceremony. A desperate thought flickered in Marcus's mind, so ridiculous that he almost dismissed it immediately. But desperation has a way of making the impossible seem worth considering. Marcus grabbed his phone and called Sarah back. I need you to find out everything you can about Elena Vasquez, he said. The housemaid? Marcus, what are you thinking? Just do it. Find out where she's from, what languages she speaks, what her background is. Find out everything. Marcus, you can't be serious. You can't ask a housemaid to interpret a $12 billion merger negotiation. Sarah, in 4 hours, I'm either going to close the biggest deal of my career or watch my company get destroyed by Jason Wright. At this point, I'm willing to consider anything. Marcus hung up the phone and continued watching Elena through the window. She had finished with the orchids and was now polishing the conference table with long, smooth strokes. Her movements were methodical and respectful, and Marcus found himself wondering what her story was. How had she ended up cleaning houses for wealthy tech executives? What dreams had she put aside to be invisible in other people's homes? More importantly, could she possibly be the miracle he needed? His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Sorry about today. Had to leave town suddenly. Family emergency. We'll explain later. David. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Something felt off about it. David was formal, professional, always signed his texts David Kim, never just David. And in 3 years, David had never mentioned having family in the United States. His parents and sister lived in Seoul, and David would have said Seoul emergency or family emergency in Korea. But there was no time to investigate David's mysterious disappearance. The Korean executives would be arriving soon, and Marcus needed to focus on the one possible solution he had left. He walked downstairs to find Elena. She was in the kitchen, helping the chef arrange the traditional Korean tea service on silver trays. When she saw Marcus approaching, she immediately stepped back and lowered her eyes, a gesture of respect that Marcus had never really noticed before, but now struck him as remarkably similar to the formal courtesy David had taught him to expect from Korean business culture. Elena, Marcus said, and she looked up with surprise. In 2 years, he had probably spoken directly to her fewer than 10 times. Yes, Mr. Chen? Elena's hands trembled slightly as she set down the silver tea service. Marcus noticed the tremor and realized that his request had shaken her more than he expected. For 2 years, Elena had existed in the background of his life, invisible and unnoticed. Now he was asking her to step into the spotlight of the most important day of his career. Mr. Chun, I don't understand, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus glanced around the kitchen, aware that his chef and other staff members were within earshot. This conversation needed privacy, and it needed honesty, 2 things that Marcus wasn't particularly comfortable with when it came to personal interactions with his employees. Can we speak in my office? Marcus asked. Elena nodded and followed him upstairs, her steps careful and quiet on the marble staircase. Marcus noticed that she moved through his house like someone who had studied every inch of it, knowing exactly how to navigate without disturbing anything or anyone. It occurred to him that Elena probably knew his home better than he did. She had cleaned every corner, organized every shelf, and maintained every detail while he focused on building his empire. In his office, Marcus closed the door and turned to face Elena. For the first time, he really looked at her. She was probably in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. She wore the same uniform she always wore, dark pants and a simple white blouse. But Marcus suddenly noticed that her clothes were impeccably clean and pressed. Even as someone whose job involved cleaning other people's messes, Elena maintained a dignity and professionalism that Marcus found himself respecting. Elena, I'm going to tell you something confidential, and I need you to keep it between us, Marcus began. Of course, Mr. Chun. In 3 hours, some very important business people from Korea are coming here to finalize a deal that could make or break my company. My interpreter, the person who helps me communicate with them, has disappeared. I can't find a replacement, and without someone who can speak Korean, this meeting could be a disaster. Elena's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw her shoulders straighten slightly. I'm sorry to hear about your problem, Mr. Chun. The thing is, Elena, I just learned that you speak Korean. And, right now, you might be the only person who can help me save this deal. Elena was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could see her mind working behind her careful expression. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but cautious. Mr. Chun, with respect, I think you may have misunderstood. When I said I speak a little Korean, I meant very little. I can order food and ask for directions. I cannot handle business negotiations. Marcus felt his hope deflating, but something in Elena's tone made him pay closer attention. There was knowledge in her voice that went beyond ordering food and asking for directions. The way she pronounced Korean sounded natural, confident even. Elena, can I ask where you learned Korean? Marcus said. Another long pause. Elena looked down at her hands, and Marcus sensed that he was approaching something personal, maybe even painful. My husband was Korean American, Elena said finally. We were married for 8 years before he passed away. Marcus felt a wave of shame wash over him. In 2 years of employing Elena, he had never asked about her personal life, never learned about her losses or her history. To him, she had been a service provider, not a human being with her own story of love and grief. I'm sorry for your loss, Marcus said, and he meant it. Can you tell me more about your Korean language skills? Elena looked up, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before: intelligence, depth, and perhaps a hint of steel beneath the quiet exterior. My husband's family didn't speak much English when I first met them, Elena said. His grandmother especially. She lived with us for 5 years before she passed away. I learned Korean because I wanted to talk to her, to understand her stories about growing up in Seoul during the war. I wanted to be part of the family, not just someone who married into it. So you can hold conversations in Korean? I could hold conversations with my husband's grandmother about her life, about cooking, about family traditions. But, Mr. Chun, business Korean is different. It's formal and specific, and it uses terms that I've never learned. Marcus walked to his window and looked down at the courtyard again. The white orchids were perfect, the table was set, and in less than 3 hours, Chairman Park and his delegation would arrive expecting to communicate with someone who understood not just their language, but their business culture and technical terminology. But, as Marcus watched Elena's reflection in the window, he remembered something David had told him about Korean business culture. Relationships mattered more than contracts. Trust mattered more than technical perfection, and respect mattered more than anything else. Elena, what do you know about Korean business customs? Marcus asked. From my husband's family, I learned that respect is everything. You bow when you meet someone important. You use formal language with elders or business superiors. You never refuse a gift, even if you can't accept it immediately. You build relationships slowly, over shared meals and conversations about family before you ever talk about business. Marcus turned around. Elena had just described, almost perfectly, everything David had spent 3 years teaching him about Korean corporate culture. Elena, I'm going to be completely honest with you about something, Marcus said. This deal isn't just about money for me. It's about proving that my company belongs in the global marketplace. It's about honoring my parents, who sacrificed everything so I could have opportunities they never had. And, right now, you're the only person who can help me make that happen. Elena looked at Marcus for a long moment, and he could see her weighing the enormity of what he was asking against something else. Maybe her own dreams, maybe her own sense of duty, maybe her own understanding of what it meant to be given an unexpected opportunity. Mr. Chun, if I agree to help you, what exactly would you need me to do? I need you to sit beside me during the meeting and help me communicate with the Korean executives. I'll handle the business details, but I need you to help me understand what they're saying and make sure they understand what I'm saying. I need you to help me show them the respect they deserve. And if I make mistakes, if I don't understand something important, Marcus considered lying, telling her that mistakes wouldn't matter, that everything would work out fine. But Elena deserved the truth. Elena, if this meeting goes badly, I could lose everything. My company, my reputation, my employees' jobs. But if I don't try, I'll definitely lose everything. At least with your help, I have a chance. Elena walked to Marcus's desk and picked up one of the merger documents. She couldn't read the English legal terminology any more than Marcus could read Korean. But she held the paper with the same careful respect she showed everything else in his house. Mr. Chun, can I ask you something personal? The question surprised Marcus. In 2 years, Elena had never asked him anything personal. Of course. Why have you never spoken to me before today? In 2 years, you've said hello maybe 10 times. You've never asked my name, my story, or anything about my life. Why now? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had built his entire career on understanding people, on knowing how to motivate employees and negotiate with partners. But he realized that he had treated Elena as invisible not because she was unimportant, but because acknowledging her humanity would have forced him to confront his own. You're right, Marcus said quietly. I've been thoughtless and disrespectful. I treated you like furniture instead of like a person. I can't change that. But if you help me today, I promise things will be different. Elena set the document back down on the desk and looked at Marcus with an expression that was both sad and wise. Mr. Chun, I'm going to help you today, but not because you're promising that things will be different. I'm going to help you because my grandmother-in-law taught me that when someone is in trouble and you have the ability to help, you help. Not for reward, not for recognition, but because that's what decent people do. Relief flooded through Marcus's chest, followed immediately by something that felt like gratitude mixed with shame. Elena was offering to rescue his career, and she was doing it despite the way he had treated her, not because of it. Thank you, Elena. I don't know how to repay you for this. You can start by treating your employees like human beings, Elena said, and there was steel in her voice that Marcus had never heard before. And if this meeting goes well, you can start by paying me like someone whose skills are valuable instead of like someone whose work is invisible. Marcus nodded. Elena was right about everything, his treatment of her, the value of her skills, and the way forward. But first, they had to get through the next 3 hours. Elena, we need to prepare. Can you help me understand how to properly greet Chairman Park and his team? David usually coached me through the cultural protocols, but now you're my guide. For the first time since their conversation began, Elena smiled. Mr. Chun, the first thing you need to understand is that Chairman Park isn't just a businessman. He's an elder, a leader, someone who has earned deep respect through decades of building his company. When you meet him, you bow, not a casual nod, but a real bow that shows you understand his importance. How deep? Deep enough that it's clear you're honoring him, not just being polite. And when you speak to him, you use the most formal Korean possible. You address him as Chairman Park Nim, never just Chairman Park. The Nim suffix shows ultimate respect. Marcus grabbed a notebook and started writing down Elena's instructions. For the first time in hours, he felt like he might have a fighting chance. What about gifts? Marcus asked. David mentioned that gift giving is important. Very important. Do you have a gift prepared? Marcus's stomach dropped. In all the panic about the missing interpreter, he had forgotten about the ceremonial gift exchange that David always handled. No, David was supposed to handle that. Elena thought for a moment. What time did you say they arrive? 2 o'clock. The drive to Koreatown in Marcus's Bentley was the strangest 40 minutes of his life. Elena sat in the passenger seat, a place usually reserved for business partners or important clients, directing him through traffic with quiet confidence while explaining the intricacies of Korean gift-giving protocols. The gift should be beautifully wrapped, Elena explained as they turned onto Western Avenue. But you don't open it when you receive it. Opening a gift immediately suggests you're more interested in what's inside than in the gesture of giving. Marcus nodded, taking mental notes. What kind of gift shows the right level of respect for a chairman? Something that demonstrates knowledge of Korean culture, but not something so personal that it seems presumptuous. Art is good, traditional Korean art, or something that represents the connection between Korea and America. As they drove deeper into Koreatown, Marcus was struck by how the neighborhood felt like stepping into another country. Signs in Korean script lined the streets. Elderly men played chess in small parks. And the smell of kimchi and barbecue drifted from restaurants that Elena navigated past with obvious familiarity. You come here often? Marcus asked. Every week, Elena replied. My husband's family still lives here. His sister owns a restaurant on 6th Street. I help her with bookkeeping sometimes. Another piece of Elena's invisible life revealed itself. Marcus realized that while he had been thinking of her as a simple housemaid, she had been living a rich, complex existence filled with relationships, responsibilities, and skills that he had never bothered to discover. Elena directed him to a small art gallery tucked between a Korean spa and a traditional medicine shop. The owner, an elderly Korean woman named Mrs. Park, greeted Elena in rapid Korean with obvious warmth and affection. Marcus stood awkwardly to the side as the two women conversed, catching only fragments of their conversation, but understanding from their body language that Elena was explaining their unusual situation. Mrs. Park says she has something perfect for Chairman Park, Elena translated. But she wants to meet you first. Mrs. Park approached Marcus and studied him with sharp, intelligent eyes. She spoke to Elena in Korean, gesturing toward Marcus with expressions that seemed to mix curiosity with assessment. She's asking if you're the tech billionaire who's been in the Korean business newspapers, Elena said. Apparently, your potential deal with Hansung Industries has been big news in the Korean-American community here. Marcus was surprised. He had never considered that his business dealings might be followed by people outside the corporate world. But it made sense that Korean Americans would be interested in major business connections between their adopted country and their homeland. Mrs. Park disappeared into the back of the gallery and returned with a wooden box that she opened with ceremonial care. Inside was a beautiful piece of traditional Korean calligraphy, black ink on cream-colored paper, with characters that flowed like water across the surface. It's a blessing for business prosperity and mutual respect, Elena translated as Mrs. Park explained the piece. The calligrapher was Mrs. Park's grandfather, who was a respected scholar in Seoul before he immigrated to Los Angeles in the 1960s. She says this piece has been waiting for the right person. Marcus looked at the calligraphy and felt something he rarely experienced: humility. The piece was beautiful, clearly valuable, and carrying the weight of family history and cultural tradition. It was exactly the kind of gift that would communicate deep respect for Korean heritage. How much does she want for it? Marcus asked. Elena translated the question, and Mrs. Park responded with what sounded like gentle scolding. She says you're asking the wrong question, Elena said, struggling not to smile. She doesn't want to sell it to you. She wants to give it to you because Elena vouched for your character, and because she believes successful business relationships between Korea and America honor both cultures. Marcus was stunned. A complete stranger was giving him a valuable piece of art based solely on Elena's recommendation. It occurred to him that Elena's opinion carried weight in this community, that she was respected and trusted in ways that his money and business success could never achieve. Please thank Mrs. Park for her incredible generosity, Marcus said, and ask her how I can properly honor this gift. Mrs. Park smiled when Elena translated Marcus's response. She spoke for several minutes, occasionally pointing to the calligraphy and making gestures that suggested she was explaining its deeper significance. She says the characters represent the concept of jong, a Korean word that doesn't translate directly into English, but means something like heart connection or emotional bond, Elena explained. She says true business partnerships aren't just about profit. They're about creating jong between people from different cultures. The calligraphy is meant to remind you that the most important part of today's meeting isn't the contract, it's the relationship. Marcus carefully accepted the wooden box, bowing deeply to Mrs. Park in a gesture that felt both foreign and natural. Mrs. Park bowed in return, and Marcus understood that something significant had just happened. He had been accepted into a circle of respect and trust that no amount of money could buy. As they drove back to Beverly Hills, Elena was quieter than she had been on the trip to Koreatown. Marcus sensed that she was thinking about something important, maybe having second thoughts about the enormous responsibility she had agreed to take on. Elena, are you okay? Marcus asked. I'm nervous, she admitted. Mrs. Park's gift is perfect, and I think I can help you communicate with Chairman Park's team. But, Mr. Chun, I need you to understand something. Korean business culture is built on sincerity. If Chairman Park senses that you're just trying to manipulate him with cultural gestures, he'll end the meeting immediately. The bowing, the gift, the formal language, none of it matters if you don't genuinely respect him and what he represents. Marcus considered Elena's words as they waited at a red light. For years, his approach to business had been strategic, calculating, focused on achieving specific outcomes. He had learned to say what people wanted to hear, to present himself in ways that would advance his goals. But Elena was telling him that this meeting would require something different, something more honest and vulnerable than he was comfortable with. How do I show genuine respect to someone I've never met? Marcus asked. You start by understanding what Chairman Park has accomplished, Elena said. Hansung Industries didn't become a global company by accident. Chairman Park built it over 40 years, starting with a small electronics shop in Seoul after the Korean War. He survived economic collapse, military dictatorship, and massive social upheaval. He's not just a businessman, Mr. Chun. He's a builder of modern Korea. David never told me that story. Maybe because David was focused on closing your deal, not on helping you understand the person you're dealing with. Chairman Park is 73 years old. He's probably thinking about legacy, about how his life's work will continue after he's gone. This merger isn't just a business transaction for him. It's about ensuring that Hansung Industries remains strong for the next generation. Marcus pulled into his driveway and looked up at his mansion, a monument to his personal success. But suddenly, seeming almost small compared to the weight of legacy and responsibility that Elena had described. Chairman Park had built something bigger than a company. He had built a piece of his country's economic future. Elena, how do I communicate that level of respect in a business meeting? You listen more than you speak, Elena said. You ask about his family, his vision for the future, his concerns about the merger. You treat him like a wise elder whose advice matters, not just like someone you're trying to convince to sign a contract. They walked into the house together, and Marcus was struck by how different everything felt. The white orchids, the polished conference table, the traditional Korean tea service. All of these details that had seemed like smart strategic choices now felt like opportunities to demonstrate the genuine respect that Elena had described. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Korean delegation's plane landed early. They'll be here in 90 minutes instead of 3 hours. Are you ready? 90 minutes. Marcus felt his heart rate spike, but when he looked at Elena, she seemed calmer than she had all day. We're ready, she said, reading the text over his shoulder. But, Mr. Chun, I need to change clothes. If I'm going to represent you in this meeting, I need to look like someone who belongs in a boardroom, not like someone who cleans it. Marcus realized that in all his panic about the missing interpreter, he hadn't considered the practical details of Elena's transformation from housemaid to business partner. She was right. Appearance mattered in Korean business culture, and Elena needed to look like the respected professional she was about to become. Sarah can take you shopping, Marcus said, already reaching for his phone. No time, Elena replied. But I have an idea. Your assistant Sarah, what size is she? Marcus had no idea what size his assistant wore, but Elena was already calling Sarah's extension. Sarah, this is Elena from the housekeeping staff. I need to borrow a business suit for today's meeting. Can you bring me something professional? Size 8. Yes, I know this sounds strange, but Mr. Chin will explain. 20 minutes later, Sarah arrived with 3 different suit options and a bewildered expression. Marcus took her aside and gave her the abbreviated version of the day's events, David's disappearance, Elena's Korean language skills, and their desperate plan to save the merger. You want a housemaid to interpret a $12 billion business negotiation? Sarah asked, her voice pitched high with disbelief. I want Elena Vasquez, who speaks Korean and understands Korean culture, to help me communicate with the most important business partners I've ever met, Marcus corrected. And, Sarah, Elena isn't just a housemaid. She's someone whose skills I've been too blind to recognize. Sarah looked at Marcus with an expression he had never seen before, something between surprise and respect. Okay, Sarah said finally. Let's make this work. Elena emerged from the guest bathroom 15 minutes later wearing one of Sarah's navy blue business suits with her hair pulled back in a professional chignon. The transformation was remarkable. She looked elegant, confident, and entirely capable of holding her own in a high-level business meeting. How do I look? Elena asked. Like someone who was born for this, Marcus replied, and he meant it. Elena smiled, but Marcus could see the nervousness behind her confidence. She was about to step into a role that could change both of their lives, and they both knew that failure wasn't just possible, it was probable. Mr. Chun, Elena said, there's one more thing I need to tell you. Chairman Park arrived exactly on time, which Elena had warned Marcus was crucial in Korean business culture. Punctuality wasn't just politeness. It was a demonstration of respect and reliability. Marcus watched through his office window as 3 black sedans pulled up to his mansion's circular driveway, each vehicle polished to mirror brightness. "Remember," Elena whispered as they walked toward the front entrance. "Bow deeply, speak slowly, and let me handle the initial greetings in Korean. Don't try to rush into business talk." Marcus nodded, his heart hammering against his ribs. In 20 years of high-stakes negotiations, he had never felt this nervous. Usually, he controlled every variable in important meetings: the location, the agenda, the participants. Today, he was operating in foreign territory with a translator he had met that morning and cultural protocols he barely understood. The front door opened, and Marcus got his first look at Chairman Park. The man was smaller in stature than Marcus had expected, probably 5.5 feet tall, with silver gray hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. But there was something in his bearing, a quiet authority that filled the space around him, that made his physical size irrelevant. This was clearly someone accustomed to command. Chairman Park was flanked by 4 colleagues: his son and heir apparent, his chief financial officer, his head of international development, and a young woman whom Marcus assumed was their interpreter. The irony wasn't lost on him. They had brought their own interpreter to ensure clear communication, while Marcus was relying on a housemaid who had learned Korean from her deceased husband's grandmother. Marcus bowed as Elena had instructed, deeper than felt natural, but not so deep as to seem theatrical. Chairman Park responded with a bow of his own, and Marcus was relieved to see approval in the older man's eyes. Elena stepped forward and spoke in Korean, her voice clear and confident. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but he recognized the formal, respectful tone she had described. Chairman Park responded, and Marcus was amazed to see the man's stern expression soften into something approaching warmth. "Chairman Park says he's honored to be welcomed into your home," Elena translated. "He appreciates the traditional Korean elements you've incorporated into the day's arrangements. He also says," Elena paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "He says your Korean pronunciation of his name is improving since your last video conference." Marcus smiled, remembering the hours David had spent coaching him on the proper pronunciation of Korean names and titles. "Please tell Chairman Park that I've been studying Korean culture because I believe understanding leads to better partnerships." Elena translated, and Chairman Park nodded approvingly. He spoke again, gesturing toward Elena with curiosity. "He's asking about my role today," Elena said quietly. This was the moment Marcus had been dreading. How do you explain to a Korean business legend that your interpreter disappeared, and you're relying on your housemaid to save a $12 billion deal? "Please tell Chairman Park that Elena Kim is my cultural advisor and interpreter. She brings deep knowledge of Korean traditions and will help us communicate with the respect this partnership deserves." Elena looked surprised at Marcus's description, but translated smoothly. Chairman Park studied Elena with increased interest, speaking to her in what sounded like a more personal tone. "He's asking about my connection to Korean culture," Elena said. "He can tell from my accent that I learned Korean from someone from Seoul." Elena responded in Korean, and Marcus watched Chairman Park's expression change. The older man's eyes widened slightly, and he spoke what sounded like a question. "I told him about my late husband and his grandmother," Elena explained to Marcus. "Chairman Park knew my husband's family. Apparently, my husband's grandfather worked for Hansung Industries in the 1980s before he immigrated to America." The revelation hung in the air like an unexpected gift. Chairman Park began speaking rapidly in Korean, and Elena responded with what was clearly a detailed conversation about family connections and shared histories. Marcus stood there feeling like an outsider to the most important conversation of his career, but gradually he realized that something extraordinary was happening. Elena wasn't just translating language. She was building a bridge between worlds. She was connecting Marcus's business ambitions to a web of personal relationships and cultural understanding that no professional interpreter could have provided. After several minutes of conversation, Elena turned to Marcus with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Chun, Chairman Park remembers my husband's grandfather. He says the older Mr. Kim was a man of great integrity who helped Hansung Industries establish its first quality control standards." Chairman Park says that knowing you employ his granddaughter-in-law makes him more confident in your company's character. Marcus felt the weight of the moment settling around him. What had started as a desperate attempt to save a business deal was transforming into something deeper, a recognition of how personal connections and cultural respect could create trust in ways that contracts and financial projections never could. Please tell Chairman Park that I'm honored by this connection, and that Elena has taught me more about Korean culture in one day than I learned in months of preparation. As Elena translated, Marcus saw Chairman Park smile for the first time. The older man spoke again, and when Elena translated, her voice carried wonder. Chairman Park says that perhaps this meeting was meant to happen exactly this way. He believes that business partnerships should be built on personal trust and cultural understanding, not just on profit projections. He wants to hear about your company's vision before we discuss the merger details. They moved to the conference room, where the traditional Korean tea service was waiting. Elena guided Marcus through the proper protocols for serving tea to honored guests, explaining in whispered English how each gesture carried meaning. Chairman Park and his team seemed genuinely impressed by Marcus's attention to Korean customs. But, more importantly, they appeared relaxed and open to conversation. For the next hour, Marcus found himself in the strangest business meeting of his career. Instead of PowerPoint presentations and financial projections, the conversation centered on family histories, cultural values, and long-term visions for technological innovation. Elena translated not just words but cultural context, helping Marcus understand when to speak and when to listen, when to ask questions, and when to share stories. Marcus told Chairman Park about his parents' immigration from Taiwan, their struggles to build a life in America, and his desire to create technologies that could bridge cultural divides. Chairman Park shared his own story of rebuilding his family's electronics business after the Korean War, and his hope that the next generation would expand Hansung Industries' global impact while maintaining its Korean roots. Chairman Park is asking about your company's approach to employee loyalty, Elena translated. In Korean business culture, companies are expected to take care of their employees like family members. This was dangerous territory. Marcus's company was known for offering competitive salaries and good benefits, but it wasn't known for the kind of lifelong employment relationships that characterized traditional Korean companies. He looked at Elena, wondering how to answer honestly without undermining the deal. Elena seemed to sense his dilemma. She spoke to Chairman Park in Korean, not translating Marcus's words but apparently offering her own perspective. Chairman Park listened carefully, asked several questions, and then nodded thoughtfully. I told him about how you've treated me, Elena said quietly to Marcus. I was honest about your initial lack of personal attention to staff. But I also told him about today, how you asked for my help, how you've promised to change, and how you've shown respect for my skills and knowledge. Marcus held his breath, waiting for Chairman Park's response. Chairman Park says that wise leaders grow from their mistakes, Elena translated. He's more interested in your willingness to learn and change than in your past perfection. But he wants to see evidence of your commitment to treating employees with dignity. What kind of evidence? Marcus asked. Elena translated the question, and Chairman Park responded with what sounded like a specific request. He wants you to formally introduce me as your Director of Cultural Affairs, Elena said, her voice barely steady. He says if you truly value my contribution to today's meeting, you should recognize it with both title and compensation. He considers this a test of your sincerity. Marcus looked at Elena Kim, who 8 hours ago had been invisible in his house, and was now being offered an executive position by a Korean billionaire who had known her husband's grandfather. The symmetry was almost too perfect to be real. Elena, Marcus said, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. I would be honored if you would accept the position of Director of Cultural Affairs for Chin Technologies. Your role would be to help our company build respectful, authentic relationships with international partners. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she maintained her composure as she translated Marcus's offer to Chairman Park. The older man smiled broadly and spoke in Korean. Chairman Park says that a leader who recognizes talent and admits mistakes is someone he can trust with a partnership, Elena translated. He's ready to discuss the merger terms. For the next 2 hours, Marcus participated in the most successful business negotiation of his career. With Elena's help, he was able to communicate not just the technical details of the proposed merger, but the cultural sensitivity and long-term vision that Chairman Park was looking for in a business partner. When Chairman Park's team left at 6 p.m., they had agreed to terms that exceeded Marcus's most optimistic expectations. The merger would proceed, Hansung Industries would maintain operational independence, and Chen Technologies would gain access to Asian markets that had been previously unreachable. But as Marcus watched the black sedans disappear down his driveway, he realized that the day's greatest achievement wasn't financial. For the first time in his career, he had built a business relationship based on genuine respect and cultural understanding rather than just strategic advantage. "Elena," Marcus said as they walked back into the house, "we did it." "You did it, Mr. Chun," Elena replied. "I just helped you find what was already inside you." Marcus looked around his mansion, the white orchids, the polished conference table, the evidence of a day that had changed everything. Tomorrow, he would call the lawyers and accountants to formalize the merger. Tonight, he wanted to understand how a missing interpreter and an invisible housemaid had taught him the most important lesson of his career. Success wasn't just about knowing the right people or having the best strategy. Sometimes, it was about recognizing the value in people who were right in front of you all along. 3 months after the merger was finalized, Marcus stood in his newly redesigned office, looking out at the same view of Los Angeles that had started his extraordinary day. But everything felt different now. The city looked more alive, more connected, as if he was finally seeing the networks of human relationships that had always existed beneath the surface of business and commerce. Elena's new office was down the hall, a spacious room with traditional Korean art on the walls, and a conference table where she held weekly cultural training sessions for Chen Technologies' expanding international team. The company's merger with Hansung Industries had opened doors across Asia, and Elena had become indispensable in navigating the complex cultural landscapes that Marcus had never even known existed. But the changes in Marcus's company went far deeper than new international partnerships. Elena had convinced him to implement what she called dignity protocols, policies that ensured every employee, regardless of their position, was treated with respect and given opportunities for advancement. The housekeeping staff now received annual reviews, educational benefits, and pathways to other roles within the company. The security guards were included in company meetings and decision-making processes that affected their work. Even the cafeteria workers had been given input into menu planning and facility improvements. It wasn't just good policy, it was good business. Employee satisfaction had increased dramatically, turnover had dropped to almost zero, and the company had discovered hidden talents throughout the organization. Miguel, one of the night security guards, spoke fluent Mandarin and now worked part-time in the International Development Division. Sandra from the cafeteria had a background in nutrition science and was helping develop health and wellness programs for employees. Marcus had learned that when you stop treating people as invisible, you discover that they were never actually invisible. You just weren't looking. The mystery of David's disappearance had been solved 2 weeks after the merger. David had been recruited by Technova, Marcus's competitor, and offered triple his salary to sabotage the Hansung deal. His family emergency had been a lie designed to leave Marcus without interpretation services at the crucial moment. Jason Wright, Marcus's former partner and current rival, had planned to swoop in and offer Hansung Industries an alternative partnership when Marcus's meeting inevitably failed. What Jason hadn't counted on was Elena. Or more precisely, he hadn't counted on the possibility that Marcus might discover value in places he had never thought to look. David's betrayal had stung, but Marcus had come to see it as a necessary catalyst. If David hadn't disappeared, Marcus never would have asked Elena for help. He never would have learned about her hidden skills, her cultural knowledge, or her deep understanding of human dignity. Most importantly, he never would have been forced to confront his own blindness to the people who made his life possible. The success of the Hansung merger had attracted attention from other Korean companies, and Elena's reputation as a cultural bridge builder had grown throughout the international business community. She was now earning a salary that reflected her unique skills, and she had been invited to speak at conferences about cross-cultural business relationships. But, for Elena, the most important change was personal. The day of the merger meeting had been the first time since her husband's death that she felt truly valued for her intelligence and capabilities, not just her willingness to work hard and stay invisible. She had discovered that grief didn't have to mean permanent diminishment, that loss could coexist with new purpose and recognition. Marcus walked down the hall to Elena's office and found her preparing for a video conference with potential partners in South Korea. She was wearing one of the business suits that had become her professional uniform. But Marcus could see traces of the quiet dignity that had first caught his attention in his kitchen 3 months ago. "How's the Seoul meeting looking?" Marcus asked. "Very promising," Elena replied. "But, Mr. Chun, they want to meet you in person. They're inviting you to visit their headquarters next month." "Us," Marcus corrected. "They're inviting us to visit their headquarters. I'm not doing any more international business without my director of cultural affairs." Elena smiled, but Marcus could see something thoughtful in her expression. "Mr. Chun, can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if David hadn't disappeared? If you had gone through with the merger meeting using your original plan?" Marcus considered the question. "I think about it sometimes. David was a skilled interpreter, and he probably could have gotten us through the meeting successfully. The merger might have happened anyway. But it would have been just a business transaction. I never would have learned about Korean concepts like Jong. I never would have understood that the most important part of business relationships is the human connection. And I definitely never would have discovered that one of the most valuable people in my company was someone I had been ignoring for 2 years." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "My husband's grandmother used to say that sometimes the universe has to break what we think we need so we can discover what we actually need." "What do you think we actually needed?" "You needed to learn how to see people. I needed to learn that my skills and knowledge had value beyond my willingness to stay invisible. And maybe the business world needed an example of how cultural respect and human dignity can create better partnerships than pure financial strategy." Marcus walked to Elena's window, which offered a different view of Los Angeles than his own office. From here, you could see Koreatown in the distance, the neighborhood where Mrs. Park's art gallery had provided the perfect gift for Chairman Park. The city looked like what it had always been, but what Marcus had never noticed, a tapestry of interconnected communities, each with its own knowledge, traditions, and contributions to offer. "Elena, I've been thinking about expanding our cultural affairs department. There are other communities in Los Angeles that we should be learning from: Latino businesses, Middle Eastern entrepreneurs, African immigrant professionals. I want Chun Technologies to become a company that builds bridges between communities, not just between corporations." "That's a beautiful vision, Mr. Chun. But can I suggest something?" "Of course. Don't hire people to represent those communities. Discover the people who are already working for you who come from those communities. I guarantee you have employees whose backgrounds and skills you haven't bothered to explore." Marcus smiled. 3 months ago, such a suggestion would have seemed impractical, inefficient, maybe even presumptuous. Now it seemed like the most obvious strategy in the world. "Will you help me figure out who those people are?" "I already started," Elena said, pulling out a folder from her desk. "I've been having lunch with different employees from across the company, just talking to them about their backgrounds and experiences. You'd be amazed by what I've learned." Elena opened the folder and showed Marcus a series of informal profiles she had compiled. Carmen from accounting had grown up in her family's Mexican restaurant and understood food service business operations better than most MBAs. Ahmed from IT support had engineered telecommunications infrastructure in Jordan before immigrating to America. Lee from graphic design had family connections throughout Chinese manufacturing networks. "These people have been working for you for months or years," Elena said. "They've been contributing their skills to your projects without ever being asked to contribute their knowledge and cultural expertise." Marcus looked through the profiles, feeling the same mix of shame and excitement that had overwhelmed him 3 months ago when he first really looked at Elena. How many opportunities had he missed? How many valuable perspectives had he ignored? How many potential partnerships and innovations had been sitting right under his nose, invisible only because he hadn't known how to see? "Elena, I want you to design a program that identifies and develops these hidden talents throughout the company. Give people opportunities to contribute their full range of skills, not just the narrow job descriptions they were hired for. I was hoping you'd say that, Elena replied, because I've already sketched out a proposal. She handed Marcus a document that outlined a comprehensive cultural integration program for Chin Technologies. It included mentorship opportunities, cross-cultural training, language learning incentives, and pathways for employees to expand their roles based on their full range of capabilities. But what impressed Marcus most was the program's underlying philosophy, that diversity wasn't just about hiring people from different backgrounds, but about creating systems that allowed those backgrounds to contribute to the company's success. This is brilliant, Elena. When can we start implementing it? Actually, we already started. The lunch conversations I've been having, those were informal interviews. The cultural training sessions I've been running, those were pilot programs. The Seoul trip you mentioned, that's our first major test of the new approach. Marcus realized that Elena had been quietly revolutionizing his company for months, implementing changes so gradually and naturally that he hadn't even noticed them happening. She had learned to manage up, to influence change from within, to create transformation without triggering resistance. Elena, you've been running this company's cultural development for months, haven't you? I've been helping you become the kind of leader you wanted to be, Elena replied. Someone who values people for their full humanity, not just their job functions. Marcus's phone buzzed with a call from Chairman Park in Seoul. Over the past 3 months, the two men had developed a genuine friendship built on their shared experience of building something meaningful from difficult circumstances. Chairman Park had become a mentor figure for Marcus, teaching him about long-term thinking and legacy building. Chairman Park, Marcus answered, putting the phone on speaker so Elena could participate in the conversation. Marcus, my friend. Chairman Park's voice came through clearly, his English heavily accented but perfectly understandable. I have news about your visit to Seoul. My granddaughter is getting married next month, and I want to invite you and Elena to attend the wedding celebration. Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. A Korean wedding invitation from Chairman Park was more than social courtesy. It was inclusion in family, recognition as trusted friends rather than just business partners. We would be deeply honored to attend, Marcus replied. Good. And, Marcus, I have been thinking about our conversation regarding business ethics and cultural values. I want to propose that we create a joint foundation, Hansung and Chun Technologies working together to support cultural exchange and business education for young entrepreneurs from both Korea and America. The proposal took Marcus's breath away. A joint foundation would cement the relationship between the two companies while creating something larger than profit, a legacy of cultural understanding and opportunity creation. Chairman Park, that sounds like exactly the kind of legacy I want to build. Elena, Chairman Park said, addressing her directly, I want you to lead the foundation's cultural programs. Your work with Marcus has shown that understanding between communities creates stronger businesses and better futures for everyone. After they finished the call, Marcus and Elena sat in her office in comfortable silence. 3 months ago, Marcus had been a successful but isolated businessman focused primarily on financial achievement. Today, he was part of a network of relationships that spanned continents and cultures, connected by shared values and mutual respect. Elena, can I ask you one more question? Of course, Mr. Chun. Do you miss cleaning houses? Elena laughed, and Marcus realized it was the first time he had ever heard her laugh freely, without the careful restraint that had characterized her earlier interactions with him. Mr. Chun, I was never cleaning houses. I was taking care of people's homes while I figured out how to rebuild my life after my husband died. But I always knew that cleaning wasn't my final destination. It was my temporary refuge. And now I'm helping people and companies discover their hidden connections. I'm building bridges between worlds that seemed separate. I'm honoring my husband's memory by using the Korean language and culture he taught me to create understanding and opportunity. Elena stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the city that had become her professional canvas. Mr. Chun, 3 months ago, you asked me to help you save your company. But I think what really happened was that we saved each other. You learned to see the people who were always around you. I learned that my skills and knowledge could create value in the world. Together, we learned that business success built on human dignity and cultural respect is more sustainable and satisfying than success built on pure competition. Marcus joined Elena at the window, looking out at Los Angeles with eyes that had been trained over the past 3 months to see connections instead of divisions, opportunities instead of obstacles, and human potential instead of job descriptions. Elena, do you think David ever regrets his decision to betray us? I hope he does, Elena replied. Not because I want him to suffer, but because I hope he learns something from seeing what he gave up. He could have been part of building something meaningful instead of just trying to tear something down. And do you think Jason Wright understands what he lost when his plan failed? Elena considered the question carefully. I think Jason Wright understands that his plan failed, but I don't think he understands why it failed. He probably thinks it was bad luck or poor timing. He doesn't understand that businesses built on deception and exploitation are ultimately weaker than businesses built on trust and respect. Marcus nodded. Jason Wright's company, Technova, was struggling financially while Chun Technologies was thriving. The Korean partnership had opened doors throughout Asia. The cultural integration program had improved both productivity and employee satisfaction. And Marcus's reputation as a leader who valued human dignity had attracted top talent from around the world. Elena, one final question. Yes. What would you tell someone else who's in the situation I was in 3 months ago? Someone successful but isolated. Someone who has everything they thought they wanted but feels like something important is missing. Elena was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could see her carefully considering her answer. I would tell them that the people who can help you discover what's missing are probably already in your life, but you haven't learned how to see them yet. I would tell them that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And I would tell them that the most valuable transformations happen when we stop trying to control everything and start paying attention to the humanity that surrounds us every day. Marcus looked at Elena Kim, his director of cultural affairs, his business partner, and his teacher in the art of seeing people clearly. 3 months ago, she had been invisible in his kitchen, arranging flowers with careful dignity. Today, she was helping him build a company and a life based on the radical idea that everyone has value, everyone has something to contribute, and everyone deserves to be seen. The merger with Hansung Industries had been successful beyond Marcus's wildest dreams. But the real transformation hadn't been about business deals or financial projections. It had been about learning that the most important skill in life isn't knowing how to get what you want. It's knowing how to recognize what you need when it appears in unexpected forms. Sometimes salvation comes disguised as crisis. Sometimes the answer to your prayers is standing quietly in your kitchen, waiting for you to finally ask the right question. And sometimes the biggest success of your career comes not from building something new, but from learning to value what was always there. Before Chairman Park arrives. What is it? My full name is Elena Vasquez Kim. When I married my husband, I took his family name because I wanted to honor his heritage. I've been cleaning your house for 2 years using my maiden name because I thought you would be more comfortable with someone who seemed less foreign. Marcus felt another wave of shame wash over him. Elena had hidden part of her identity to make him comfortable, anticipating prejudices that he probably would have had without even realizing it. Elena, Marcus said, today you use whatever name feels right to you. And, I promise, going forward, you'll never have to hide who you are in my house. Elena nodded, and Marcus saw tears in her eyes that she quickly blinked away. Okay, Mr. Chun, let's save your company. Elena looked at her watch. That gives us 2 hours. I know a Korean art shop in Koreatown where we can find an appropriate gift. Something that shows you understand and respect Korean culture. Mr. Chun, if I'm going to help you with this meeting, we need to work as a team. That starts now. Marcus looked at Elena, really looked at her, and realized that somewhere in the past hour, the dynamic between them had shifted completely. She was no longer his invisible housemaid. She was his partner, his cultural guide, and possibly his salvation. Elena, let's go shopping. I need to ask you something important. Do you speak Korean? Elena's eyes widened, and, for a moment, Marcus thought he saw something flicker across her face. Recognition, maybe even fear. I speak a little Korean, Mr. Chun, she said quietly. A little Korean. It wasn't much, but it was infinitely more than Marcus spoke. And infinitely more than nothing, which was currently his alternative. Elena, I need your help with something unusual. Something that could change both of our lives.